I buried my wife a year ago. Yesterday I saw her alive in a bank, same scar above her eyebrow, same faint mark on her wrist, same laugh I'd heard clearly for 35 years. I followed her home, and when I saw where she was living, I felt regret. But what was the worst part, my son knew everything. He had known for 3 years. He had helped her. So I bought a voice recorder, and I will make them all pay. Thank you for being here. What would you do if you saw your dead spouse alive? Would you confront them immediately or gather evidence first, like Robert did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. This is a fictional story exploring trust and betrayal. Any resemblance to real people is coincidental, but the themes are deeply meaningful. Let's begin. I buried my wife a year ago. Yesterday I saw her alive. I know how that sounds. Grief does strange things to the mind, makes you see faces in crowds, hear voices in empty rooms. For months after Catherine died, I'd catch myself turning in grocery stores, certain I'd heard her laugh. But this was different. This wasn't my imagination. This was Catherine, my Catherine, standing 20 feet away in the Chase Bank on North Central Avenue, very much alive. The funeral was a year ago this April. Closed casket. They said the accident was too severe. I remember standing there in my black suit, thinking that polished wooden box didn't look big enough to hold 35 years of marriage. Richard Thompson stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, brother," he kept saying. "We buried her on a Tuesday." The Arizona sun was brutal. Daniel, my son, stood on my other side, hidden behind dark sunglasses. I didn't cry. The grief was too big, it sat in my chest like a stone. Yesterday at 2:47 in the afternoon, I learned something worse than grief, not knowing what's real at all. She was at the counter to my left, talking to a teller about opening a new account. Casual, comfortable, alive. Her hair was shorter, styled differently, but still that auburn shade that used to catch the light. She wore a blue blouse I'd never seen before, but it was her face that stopped my heart. The scar, that tiny crescent above her right eyebrow, the one she got when Daniel was 5, and she tripped over our garden hose chasing him. 3 stitches. She used to joke it made her look tough. And the birthmark. A small heart-shaped mark on the inside of her left wrist. She always kept it hidden under bracelets. She was self-conscious about it. I used to kiss it every morning and tell her it was my favorite part of her. But it was the laugh that destroyed me. The teller said something, and Catherine threw her head back and laughed. That laugh, slightly husky, warm like whiskey and honey. I had heard that laugh every single day for 35 years. My phone was in my hand before I realized it. I held it low and snapped 3 photos. My hands shook so badly the first 2 blurred, but the third one was crystal clear. Catherine, my wife, my dead wife, smiling at a bank teller. "Can I help you, sir?" I jerked toward the voice. A young woman in a Chase uniform looked at me expectantly. Somehow the line had moved without me noticing. My voice came out like gravel. "Sorry, I just need to deposit this check." I fumbled through the transaction, my eyes darting back to where she stood finishing her business. I watched her sign something, watched her shake the teller's hand, watched her turn toward the door. That's when I heard the name. "Thank you, Ms. Coleman," the teller called. "Welcome to Chase. If you need anything else, Patricia, just let us know." Patricia Coleman. My wife's name was Catherine Mitchell, Catherine Brooks before we married. Never Patricia, never Coleman. But that was her face, her scar, her birthmark, her laugh. She walked past me close enough that I could smell her perfume. Not the same one. Catherine had worn Chanel No. 5 since we were 25. This was something different, lighter, floral, but it was her. I should have called out, grabbed her arm, demanded answers. Instead, I stood frozen, watching her push through the glass doors and disappear. By the time I made it outside, she was gone. Just another car pulling north on Central Avenue. I stood there in the sun, my heart hammering. The death certificate said April 15th, 2023. The funeral was April 22nd. I'd stood at her grave 100 times, leaving flowers, talking to the headstone like a fool. But if that was Catherine in the bank, and every cell in my body knew it was, then who the hell did I bury? I drove home in a daze, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The photos sat on my phone like grenades. I pulled into my driveway, 2847 East Camelback Road, the house we'd bought in 1994, and sat in the car for 20 minutes. Finally, I forced myself inside. Coffee cup in the sink, newspaper on the table, her favorite chair still angled toward the window the way she liked it. I opened my phone, zoomed in on the third photo. That scar, that birthmark, that face. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried to think rationally. Maybe it was a mistake. A coincidence, a woman who just happened to look exactly like my dead wife. But 35 years of marriage doesn't lie. I knew her walk. I knew her gestures. I knew the way she tilted her head when she was concentrating. That was Catherine. I sat there for hours, staring at that photo as the sun went down and the house grew dark around me. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Everything normal. Everything wrong. Around midnight, I finally accepted what I'd been trying to deny all evening. My wife hadn't died in that accident a year ago. She'd faked it. Somehow, for some reason, Catherine had staged her own death and walked away from 35 years of marriage without looking back. And now she was living in Phoenix under a different name, opening bank accounts, wearing new clothes, laughing like the past year, like I had never existed. As I watched her disappear through those glass doors, one thought screamed louder than my grief ever had. If my wife was alive, then who was buried in her grave? I should have left the bank. I should have gone home, locked the door, and told myself grief had finally broken something inside me. But I didn't leave. Instead, I sat in my car and waited. The parking lot shimmered with afternoon heat. I watched the entrance hands gripping the steering wheel, telling myself this was insane, that any second now I'd come to my senses. Then she walked out. Same blue blouse, same confident stride. She clicked a key fob, and a silver Honda Accord blinked its lights 2 rows over. I started my engine. For 35 years I'd been a good man. Honest. Reliable. I'd never followed anyone in my life. But as that Honda pulled onto North Central Avenue, I pulled out 3 cars behind. The drive to Scottsdale took 30 minutes. 30 minutes of white-knuckle driving, keeping close enough not to lose her, far enough not to be spotted. My heart hammered. My mouth was dry. Every red light felt like an eternity. She drove like someone with nothing to hide. No sudden turns, no checking mirrors. Just a woman heading home after errands. We crossed into Scottsdale neighborhoods, getting nicer houses, getting bigger. She turned onto West Saguaro Boulevard. I followed, hanging back, watching her pull into a driveway halfway down the block. 1523 West Saguaro Boulevard. A ranch-style house, beige with white trim. Wooden fence. Copper wind chimes hanging from the porch. The kind of house that said comfortable, established, happy. I parked across the street, 2 houses down, hidden behind a landscaping truck. Catherine got out, purse over her shoulder. She walked to the front door like she owned the place. The door opened before she could knock. And that's when my heart stopped for the second time that day. Richard Thompson stood in the doorway. Richard, my best friend for 35 years. The man who'd stood beside me at my wedding, who'd been there when Daniel was born, who'd helped me start Mitchell Climate Control when we were both 25 and stupid enough to think we could build something. Richard, who'd held my shoulder at Catherine's funeral and told me everything would be okay. He smiled when he saw her, the kind of smile you don't give to a stranger. He pulled her into his arms. She melted into him, head on his chest, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. He kissed the top of her head. She tilted her face up, and he kissed her mouth. Not a friendly kiss, a husband's kiss. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted sideways. Then I heard the voices. Grandma Patricia. 2 kids came running out, a girl maybe 10 and a younger boy, shouting, laughing, arms outstretched. Catherine dropped to her knees and caught them both. Sarah Ryan. Oh, I missed you too. Behind them came a younger man, mid-30s, Richard's son Tyler, and a woman who must be Jennifer, his wife. Smiling, waving, comfortable with this scene. My dead wife playing grandmother to my best friend's grandchildren. While Richard wrapped his arm around her waist like she belonged there. They all went inside. The door closed. The copper wind chimes swayed in the breeze. I sat there as afternoon faded to evening, as streetlights came on. As Tyler and Jennifer came back out, buckled the kids into their SUV and drove away with waves and blown kisses. Sat there as lights turned on inside. As I saw Richard and Catherine move past windows, looking like exactly what they were, a couple settling in for a quiet evening at home. 3 layers of betrayal crashed over me. My wife had faked her death. My wife was living with another man. That man was my best friend of 35 years. The man I'd trusted with everything. The man I'd called at 3 in the morning when Daniel broke his arm. The man who'd co-signed my first business loan. The man who'd cried at Catherine's funeral, fake tears, I realized now. Perfectly performed grief, while he already knew she was alive. While he'd probably been planning this with her for God knows how long. Around 9 o'clock, I finally started the car. My neck was stiff. My back ached. My eyes burned. I took one last look at that house with the beige paint and copper wind chimes. The house where my dead wife was very much alive. I sat in my car for 3 hours, watching my dead wife play grandmother to my best friend's grandchildren. When I finally drove away, I knew 3 things for certain: Catherine was alive. She was living with Richard. And I had been the biggest fool in Arizona. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing, holding Sarah and Ryan, kissing Richard on the cheek, like they'd been together for years. The house at 2847 East Camelback Road had never felt so empty. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the photo from the bank. The overhead light hummed. The refrigerator clicked on and off. Normal sounds. A normal night. Except nothing about this was normal. I zoomed in on the photo. Closer, closer, until Catherine's face filled the entire screen, the scar above her right eyebrow, that tiny crescent moon, the birthmark on her left wrist, heart-shaped, visible where her sleeve had pulled back. This wasn't some woman who looked like Catherine. This was Catherine. I sat back, rubbing my eyes. The clock on the microwave read 2:47 a.m. I'd been staring at this photo for 5 hours. My mind kept circling the same question. How does someone fake their own death? The funeral home, the death certificate, the medical examiner. Someone had to be in on it. Multiple someones. And Richard. 35 years of friendship. We'd started our businesses the same year, him in commercial real estate, me in climate control. We'd gone to each other's kids' graduations, spent Thanksgivings together. I'd trusted him with my life, and he'd been sleeping with my wife, planning this with her. standing beside me at her funeral saying, "I'm so sorry, brother." The rage hit me so suddenly, I had to grip the table to keep from throwing my laptop across the room. But beneath the rage was something worse. I hadn't been paying attention. Catherine had been distant the last few years, restless. Started going out more with friends, book club, yoga classes, or so she'd said. How many of those nights had she been with Richard and Daniel? My son, 38 years old, CFO of Mitchell Climate Control Services. The boy I'd taught to throw a baseball. Daniel had been different lately, distant. We used to have lunch every Friday, but over the past 6 months he'd canceled more often than not. Work was busy, he said. Big contracts. He needed to focus. I'd believed him. Now, sitting in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, I realized Daniel had started pulling away right around the time Catherine died. No, not when she died. When she disappeared. My hands shook as I picked up my phone. I found Daniel's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. It was 3:40 in the morning. A normal person would wait until daylight, would think this through. But I wasn't thinking anymore. I was drowning. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Dad!" Daniel's voice was groggy. "What's wrong?" "I need you to come over," I said. My voice sounded flat, mechanical. "Now." "Dad, it's almost 4 in the morning. Can't this wait?" "I saw your mother yesterday." Silence. Not the shocked silence of someone processing impossible information. Not confused silence trying to make sense of crazy words. Just silence. The kind that speaks volumes. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Daniel said quietly. He didn't ask where I'd seen her. Didn't ask if I was sure. Didn't say, "Dad, that's impossible, Mom's been dead for a year." Didn't suggest I'd been mistaken, grief-stricken, imagining things. He just said he'd be there. And I knew. I hung up and stared at my phone. Daniel hadn't asked a single question, hadn't sounded surprised. His voice had gone quiet, resigned, the voice of someone who'd been caught. My son already knew. The rage was gone, now replaced by something colder. Something that sat in my chest like ice. In 20 minutes, Daniel would walk through that door. And I was going to ask him one simple question. How long have you known your mother was alive? I stood up, walked to the living room window. The street was empty, dark, a few porch lights glowing. Somewhere out there in a house with copper wind chimes, Catherine was sleeping beside Richard. Comfortable, safe, building a new life while I'd spent a year visiting a grave that held a stranger. I thought about the flowers I'd left there, the conversations I'd had with a headstone, the nights I'd sat in our bedroom holding her favorite sweater, breathing in the faint smell of her perfume. All of it a lie. The death certificate said April 15th, 2023. The funeral was April 22nd. I'd signed papers, dealt with life insurance, closed her bank accounts, changed utilities into my name. Who helps you fake a death? Who signs off on paperwork? Who lies on official documents? And why? That was the question that burned hottest. Why would Catherine do this? We'd had problems, what marriage doesn't after 35 years, but nothing that warranted this. Nothing that couldn't have been solved with conversation, counseling, even divorce if it came to that. But this faking death, staging a funeral, letting me grieve for a year while she built a new life 20 miles away that took planning, commitment, money, and help. Headlights turned onto Camelback Road. A familiar truck, Daniel's white F-150. I watched him park in the driveway, watched him sit there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, gathering courage. He knew what was coming. "Tell me," I said. My voice sounded distant even to myself. "Tell me right now, Daniel. Everything." He stood in the doorway, still wearing the sweatpants and t-shirt he'd slept in. His face was pale under the kitchen lights. Dark circles, hollow cheeks. He looked like something had been eating him from the inside. He didn't move, just stared at the floor. "Sit down." He sat slowly, like a man approaching his execution. I slid the photo across the table, Catherine's face clear as day, frozen in mid-laugh. "This is your mother, at Chase Bank yesterday, alive." Daniel looked at the photo. His hands started shaking, then his shoulders, then his whole body. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Dad, I'm so sorry." Not, "That's impossible." Not, "You're mistaken." Just, "I'm sorry." "How long?" My voice was calm, too calm. "How long have you known your mother was alive?" He didn't answer, just sat there, tears running down his face. "Daniel," I said his name once, quiet, cold. "How long?" 3 years, since 2021. The room tilted. 3 years, and Daniel had known the entire time. "Start at the beginning," I said. "Don't leave anything out." He wiped his face, took a shaky breath. "Mom and Richard, they started 7 years ago, 2017. 7 years. Right after Daniel graduated from ASU. Right after we'd taken that trip to San Diego. Catherine had held my hand on the beach and said she was proud of what we'd built, all while sleeping with Richard." "Go on." "Richard wanted her to leave you, but Mom said if she divorced you, she'd lose half of everything. The house, the business. She said it wasn't fair." My jaw clenched. We had built Mitchell Climate together. But that was 30 years ago. The last decade, she'd barely been involved. "So Richard suggested something else." Daniel continued, voice barely above a whisper. "He said if you thought she was dead, she'd get everything. Life insurance. The business would go to me and I could give it to her later." "She bought a policy." Daniel nodded. 2021, $1.5 million. You were primary beneficiary, I was secondary. If something happened to just her, you'd get the payout. I'd inherit the business. Then I'd hand it over to Mom. "How much did she promise you?" I asked. $1 million from the insurance. I'd keep the business, $3.5 million. She said you'd be fine, that you'd move on, that you'd probably be happier without her. A win for everyone. I stood up. Needed to move or I'd put my fist through the wall. "And you believed her." "I didn't want to," Daniel sobbed. "But she kept saying how miserable she was, how she'd given up everything for you and deserved to be happy. And Richard said the same things. Said you'd taken her for granted." "Richard." I turned to face him. "My best friend of 35 years was helping my wife plan her fake death, and you went along with it." I was weak. I wanted the money. I wanted the business. I told myself it was okay because you weren't losing anything important. Just money. Just things. He broke down. "But I was wrong. God, Dad, I was so wrong." I sat back down. Looked at this 38-year-old man who'd sold me out for $4.5 million. "You've known for 3 years. You knew when she bought the policy. You knew when she was planning it." "Yes." "You stood at her funeral, hugged me, cried. The whole time knowing she was alive." "Yes." "You let me grieve for a year. Let me visit her grave, bring flowers, talk to a headstone like a fool." Daniel covered his face with his hands. "And where was she?" I asked. "All this time, where was Catherine? With Richard, in Scottsdale. She moved in right after the funeral." The funeral, past tense, like it was a real event and not an elaborately staged lie. "The life insurance," I said. "When did you collect?" "June 2023, about 6 weeks after the funeral." "Shatutu, how much?" "1.45 million, after fees." And the business transferred to you automatically? Yes. You'd signed the succession documents years ago. Mitchell Climate Control Services. My life's work. $3.5 million. Gone. Handed to my son on a silver platter while I mourned a woman who was 20 miles away, living with my best friend. So she got her money, I said. Richard got his girlfriend. You got a fortune. And I got what Daniel. What did I get? He couldn't answer, could barely breathe through his sobs. I leaned forward. How, Daniel? How did she fake her death? You can't just decide to die. There are death certificates, medical examiners, bodies. Daniel looked up at me. His face was destroyed. There was a woman, he whispered. A homeless woman, sick, dying. My blood went cold. Mom found her and... He couldn't finish. And what? Daniel's eyes met mine. And waited. When? I asked. My voice was mechanical, now stripped of emotion. When did she die, the real woman? Daniel's hands trembled on the table. April 15th, last year. April 15th, 1 week before the funeral. 1 week before I'd stood in front of a closed casket. Tell me about her, I said. This woman whose grave I've been visiting for a year. Daniel wiped his face with shaking hands. They found her at St. Vincent de Paul Shelter, downtown Phoenix, October 2022. Mom and Richard had been looking for months. Looking for what? Someone the right age, right build, right hair color. Someone who looked enough like Mom that if anyone saw medical records, it wouldn't raise questions. My stomach turned. They'd been shopping for a body. She had terminal cancer, Daniel continued. Stage 4. The doctors said maybe 3 months. She had no family, no one who'd come looking. Mom said... He choked on the words. Mom said they were doing her a kindness, that she was suffering. A kindness. The word tasted like poison. Your mother befriended a dying woman so she could steal her corpse. They visited her, brought food. Mom spent hours at her bedside. The woman thought she'd finally found friends. I closed my eyes. Saw Catherine sitting beside a hospital bed, holding some poor woman's hand, counting down the days until she could use her body as a prop in an elaborate lie. What was her name? Mom never told me. She said it was safer if I didn't know. Safer. This woman died alone, was buried under someone else's name, and we didn't even know who she was. She died on April 15th, I said. Then what? Richard called Dr. Sullivan, James Sullivan. He'd worked at Phoenix General for 20 years. Richard had been paying him for months $50,000 total. Half up front, half when it was done. What exactly did this doctor do? He was on call that night. When the woman died, he was the one who signed off. He put Mom's name on the death certificate instead. Catherine Brooks Mitchell. Date of birth, March 3rd, 1966. He listed cause of death as multiple traumatic injuries consistent with motor vehicle accident. There was no accident. Just a woman dying of cancer in a hospital bed, while a doctor sold his ethics for $50,000. The body went straight from the hospital to Messenger Mortuary, Daniel said. Richard had already paid them. He told them the family wanted a closed casket, that the accident had been too severe. They never questioned it. And Catherine, where was she during all this? She left town April 14th, the day before the woman died. Flew to San Diego under her new name, Patricia Coleman. She'd had the ID made months earlier. Fake driver's license, fake social security card, everything. She stayed at a hotel near the airport. For how long? A week, through the funeral. She didn't come back to Arizona until May. I tried to picture it. Catherine sitting in a hotel room in San Diego, probably watching TV, ordering room service while I stood at her funeral and sobbed like a child. When did she move in with Richard? May 3rd, 2 weeks after the funeral. She drove straight from the airport to his house in Scottsdale, 1523 West Saguaro Boulevard. She's been there ever since. 11 months. For 11 months, Catherine had been living 20 miles away while I fell apart. "The money," I said. "Walk me through exactly how you gave it to her." Daniel pulled out his phone with shaking hands, opened his banking app, showed me a list of transfers. July 2023, first transfer, $50,000 to Patricia Coleman Wells Fargo account. Mom said to keep them small at first, nothing that would trigger alerts. September 2023, 200,000. October 2023, 150,000. November 2023, 300,000. December 2023, 200,000. January 2024, 200,000. I did the math in my head. That's 1.1 million. Yes. You sent my wife, my supposedly dead wife, $1.1 million of my life insurance money while I was putting flowers on a stranger's grave. Daniel couldn't look at me. "Did she ever ask about me?" I asked. "In all those phone calls, all those transfers, did Catherine ever once ask how I was doing?" Silence. "Did she know?" "No." Daniel whispered. "She didn't want to know. She said it was easier that way." Easier. It was easier for Catherine not to think about the man she'd been married to for 35 years. Easier not to wonder if he was eating, sleeping, surviving. Easier to just take the money and start over with Richard like I'd never existed. "The business transferred to you automatically," Daniel said, trying to fill the silence. "Mitchell Climate Control. You'd set up the succession plan years ago. When Mom died, when everyone thought she died, I became the owner. All 3.5 million. And you were just going to keep it. Mom said to run it for a few years, make it look legitimate, then sell it and give her half. But He broke down again. "I couldn't do it, Dad. Every day going into that office, seeing your name on everything, knowing what I'd done. But you didn't tell me." My voice was ice. "You didn't pick up the phone and say, 'Dad, I made a mistake.' You just kept going, kept lying." I was a coward. "Yes, you were." I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to stay upright. "Get out," I said quietly. "Dad, please, get out of my house." Daniel reached for me. "I'm so sorry. Get out." He stumbled to the door, shoulders shaking, paused at the threshold like he wanted to say something else. "Go," I said. He left. The door closed. The house fell silent. I stood there as dawn light crept through the windows. The coffee maker beeped. The refrigerator hummed. Everything normal. Everything wrong. And for the first time in a year, I understood I hadn't been mourning my wife. I'd been mourning a lie. For 3 days, I did nothing. I sat in the house we'd built together, the house where I'd raised Daniel, where Catherine and I had celebrated 35 years of marriage, and I felt myself transform. Grief turned to rage. Shock turned to clarity. Weakness turned to steel. Day 1. I sat in the living room and stared at our wedding photo on the mantel. Catherine in white, me in a rented tux, both of us 25 years old, and stupid enough to believe forever meant something. I picked up the frame, looked at her smile, that same smile she'd given Richard, that same smile she'd given the bank teller as Patricia Coleman. I threw the frame against the wall. Glass shattered. The photo landed face down on the hardwood. I left it there. Day 2, I walked through every room like a stranger in my own house. The kitchen where Catherine made coffee every morning at 6. The bedroom where we'd slept beside each other for 35 years. How many nights had she lain there planning her escape? The spare room that used to be Daniel's, still decorated with his high school football trophies. My son, my wife, my best friend. 3 people who'd betrayed me without hesitation. I stood in the bedroom doorway and looked at the wedding ring on my left hand. Solid gold. Engraved inside, C+R Forever, June 17, 1899. Forever had lasted 34 years and 10 months. I twisted the ring off the first time I'd removed it since our wedding day. My finger looked pale underneath, like the skin had forgotten sunlight. I set the ring on Catherine's nightstand. I wasn't a husband anymore. Day 3, I woke up different. The grief was still there, would probably always be there, but underneath it was something harder. Something cold and sharp and focused. Catherine had spent 7 years planning this. 7 years lying to my face. If she could plan for 7 years, I could plan for 7 days. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and started researching. Private investigators, Phoenix. Life insurance fraud penalties. Faking death charges. The law was clear: insurance fraud over $1 million carried up to 30 years in federal prison. Identity theft added 5 to 15 years. Conspiracy could add more. Catherine, Richard, Daniel, Dr. Sullivan, they'd all be looking at serious prison time. When I could prove it. Around noon on day 3, I found what I needed: Morrison Investigations. 1200 North 7th Street, downtown Phoenix. The website showed a man in his early 60s, ex-cop, 20 years, with Phoenix PD 15 more as a private investigator. Specialized in fraud and asset recovery. Reviews called him thorough, discreet, and expensive. Perfect. I called. A woman answered. Morrison Investigations. I need to speak with Frank Morrison. It's urgent. Regarding, my wife faked her death a year ago. I just found out she's alive. Silence. Then, hold please. 30 seconds later, a man's voice came on. Deep, gravelly. This is Frank Morrison. Mr. Morrison, my name is Robert Mitchell. I need your help. Tell me what happened. I told him the basics. Wife supposedly died. April 2023, saw her alive yesterday. At a bank, followed her to my best friend's house. Need proof I'm not losing my mind. Frank didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "Can you come to my office today?" When? 3 o'clock. I looked at my watch. 12:47. I'll be there. Morrison Investigations occupied the 2nd floor of an older building, downtown, sandwiched between a bail bondsman and a tax attorney. The waiting room was small: 4 chairs, outdated magazines, a reception desk. Mr. Mitchell. The receptionist looked up. Frank's ready. 2nd door on the left. Frank Morrison's office was functional, cluttered. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A massive desk dominated the center, covered in folders and coffee cups. Behind it sat Frank, 62, gray hair, buzzed, military short shoulders, that said he'd been a linebacker once. He stood and shook my hand. Firm grip. Sit. I sat. He leaned back, folded his hands, looked at me with eyes that had seen everything twice. Tell me again. Everything. Don't leave anything out this time. So I told him. The affair starting 2017. The life insurance policy. The homeless woman. Dr. Sullivan and the fake death certificate. The funeral with a stranger in the casket. Daniel's confession. Catherine living as Patricia Coleman. Richard playing grieving best friend while sleeping with my wife. 1.5 million in insurance. 3.5 million in business assets. 11 months of lies. Frank took notes in a leather notebook. Didn't look surprised. Just wrote it down like I was describing a grocery list. When I finished, he set down his pen. This is one of the most elaborate frauds I've seen in 15 years, he said. And I've seen everything. Can you prove it? Can I prove your wife is alive? Yes. That's easy. Can I prove she faked her death harder? We'd need the homeless woman's real identity. Medical records. Proof Dr. Sullivan falsified documents. Financial records showing the money trail. Can you get all that? Some of it. The fake ID bank accounts, money transfers, I can track those. Medical records need court orders. He leaned forward. Here's my plan. I spend 7 to 10 days doing a deep dive. I confirm Patricia Coleman is Catherine Mitchell. I get photos, surveillance, financial records proving she's alive and committed fraud. Then we take everything to the police and let them handle the criminal side. How much? $15,000, flat rate. Covers 10 days of investigation, all expenses, and a full report you can take to law enforcement. $15,000. A week ago, that would have felt like a fortune. Now it felt like nothing. I want her on tape, I said. I want proof she knew what she was doing. Frank studied me. You want a confession? Yes. That's riskier. Arizona is a one-party consent state you can record without the other person knowing. But if you confront her and she gets spooked, she could run. She won't run, I said. She thinks she got away with it. She thinks I'm just a grieving widower who'll never figure it out. Frank's mouth twitched. All right. We'll build the case first. Get everything documented. Then, when we're ready, you confront her. With me listening, recording everything. He pulled out a contract. Standard private investigator agreement. I skimmed it, retainer rates, confidentiality. I signed it. Wrote a check for $15,000. Frank tucked it into a folder. I'll start today. Give me your phone number, Daniel's full name, Richard Thompson's address, any bank information you have. I rattled off everything. Frank wrote it down. One more thing, he said. Your son Daniel. He's going to figure out you're investigating. Is he going to warn your wife? I thought about Daniel's face 3 days ago, the way he'd sobbed. No, he won't warn her. He's too much of a coward. Frank nodded. Good. Then we have a chance. I stood, shook his hand again. Mr. Mitchell, Frank said. Last question. What do you want out of this justice revenge, your money back? I looked at him. I want all of it, I said. I want her arrested. I want the money back. I want everyone who helped her to face consequences. And I want her to know that I'm the one who did this to her. Frank's expression didn't change. Then we'll make sure she knows. As I left Frank's office, the Phoenix sun hit me like a wall of heat. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching traffic flow down 7th Street. Normal people going about normal lives. None of them knew their worlds could explode in a single afternoon at a bank. I walked to my truck, climbed in, and sat there with the engine running and the AC blasting. For a year, I'd been a ghost, walking through my days in a fog of grief, barely functioning, just trying to survive until tomorrow. Catherine had turned me into that, had stripped away everything I was, and left behind a hollow man who visited graves and cried in empty bedrooms. But that man was gone now. I pulled out my phone, looked at the photo from the bank one more time. Catherine's face, that laugh, that confidence. She thought she'd won, thought she'd pulled off the perfect crime, thought she'd buried me along with that homeless woman, and I'd never dig my way out. She was wrong. As I left Frank's office, I felt something I hadn't felt in a year, purpose. Catherine thought she'd buried me along with that homeless woman. She thought I'd spend the rest of my life mourning. She was wrong. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was hunting. 7 days later, Frank called. I have enough for a full report, he said. "You should come in." I was at the kitchen table, the same spot where Daniel had confessed 10 days ago. When? Now if you can. 20 minutes later, I was back at 1200 North 7th Street. Frank was waiting, a thick manila folder on his desk. He slid it across to me. "Everything's in there. Photos, financial records, phone logs. It's enough for the police, but you'll want to read it first." I opened the folder. The first page was a typed summary: subject, Catherine Brooks Mitchell / Patricia Coleman, findings subject, confirmed alive, residing at 1523 West, Saguaro Boulevard, Scottsdale, with Richard Thompson. Living under false identity since May 2023. I turned the page. The fake ID section showed copies of Patricia Coleman's driver's license and social security card, all created early 2023. The social security number belonged to Margaret Reeves, a woman who died in Tucson in 2019. Stolen identity. Catherine's photo stared up at me from the license. Same face, different name. Issued March 2023, 1 month before her death. Next came financial records. Patricia Coleman's Wells Fargo account opened June 3, 2023, 12 days after the funeral. 6 deposits over 7 months. July 18, 2023, $50,000. September 12, 2023, $200,000. October 8, 2023, $150,000. November 15, 2023, $300,000. December 4, 2023, $200,000. January 9, 2024, $200,000. Total $1,100,000 each from a different account. Daniel had been careful, but Frank had traced them all back to the life insurance payout. "Keep going," Frank said quietly. Phone records, pages of call logs. Catherine's old number had been calling Richard since 2017. Frank had highlighted the patterns: late-night calls, afternoon calls when I was at work, weekend calls when she claimed she was at book club. 312 calls over 7 years. Then calls after she died. Patricia Coleman's new number in contact with Daniel. 47 calls between May 2023 and March 2024. My son and my dead wife chatting while I visited her grave every Sunday. I set the folder down, took a breath. "There's more," Frank said. Surveillance photos. The first photo showed Catherine and Richard walking hand in hand down a Scottsdale shopping street. She was laughing. He was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Next, Catherine at a coffee shop with Jennifer Tyler's wife. Both smiling, leaning in like old friends. Jennifer had no idea she was having coffee with a dead woman. More photos: Catherine at a grocery store. Catherine planting flowers at the Scottsdale house. Catherine and Richard at a restaurant toasting with wine. Every photo showed the same thing: a woman living her life. No guilt, no fear. She really thought she'd gotten away with it. The final section listed recommended criminal charges: Catherine Brooks Mitchell, insurance fraud federal. Up to 30 years, identity theft federal. 5 to 15 years, conspiracy to commit fraud. 2 to 10 years, Richard Thompson. Conspiracy to commit fraud. 2 to 10 years, aiding and abetting. Up to 20 years, Daniel Mitchell, insurance fraud. Up to 30 years, conspiracy. 2 to 10 years, money laundering. Up to 20 years, Dr. James Sullivan, medical fraud. 5 to 10 years, falsifying death certificate. 2 to 5 years, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years. Life-destroying sentences. Good. I closed the folder. My hands were steady, steadier than they'd been in a year. "What's the next step?" I asked. Frank leaned back. "That depends. Do you want justice through the courts? I can take this to Phoenix PD right now. Detective I know in fraud division. Arrest warrants by end of week. Or you want them to confess first. On tape. With their own words. He paused. Riskier. Gives them a chance to run if they figure out what you're doing. But it makes the prosecutor's case airtight. I thought about Daniel's tears, about Richard's hand on my shoulder at the funeral, voice breaking, "I'm so sorry, brother." About Catherine laughing in those photos, living her best life while I fell apart. I want them to confess, I said. On tape. What will you do? Frank asked as I stood to leave. I looked at him. I'm going to make Daniel tell me everything again, and this time I'll be recording. Frank nodded slowly. Arizona is a one-party consent state. You can record any conversation you're part of without the other person knowing. It's completely legal. Good. But you'll need more than just Daniel, he said. You'll need to confront Catherine and Richard, too. Get them on tape admitting what they did. The more evidence, the better. One step at a time, I said. Daniel first. Frank pulled out a business card, wrote a name and number on the back. Before you do anything, talk to this person. Victoria Ross. She's a criminal defense attorney, but she also consults on fraud cases. She'll tell you exactly what you need to get on tape to make the charges stick. I took the card. Thanks, Frank. One more thing. He leaned forward. When you confront them, any of them, stay calm. Don't threaten. Don't lose your temper. Just ask questions and let them talk. The calmer you are, the more they'll say. Angry people clam up. Comfortable people confess. I nodded. Comfortable. Got it. Victoria Ross's office was in a glass tower downtown at 201 East Washington Street. 15th floor corner office with a view of the whole city. She was younger than I expected, mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. The kind of person who didn't miss anything. Mr. Mitchell. She shook my hand, gestured to a chair. Frank Morrison called ahead. He says you have quite a story. I sat down and told her everything. She didn't interrupt. Just listened, taking occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen. This is one of the most elaborate insurance frauds I've seen, she said, and I've prosecuted dozens. The good news is you have excellent evidence. The bad news is you need more. What kind of more? Confessions. On tape. Frank's report is solid. The fake ID, the money transfers the phone records. But a good defense attorney could argue circumstantial evidence. Maybe your wife has a twin. Maybe the money transfers were loans. Maybe the phone calls were innocent. That's ridiculous. I agree. But juries have been convinced by worse. She leaned forward. What you need is Catherine, Richard, and Daniel explicitly admitting what they did. In their own words. On tape. Then there's no defense. That's the plan. Good. Here's what you need them to say. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, started writing. From Daniel, confirmation that he knew about the plan before Catherine died. That he received the insurance money. That he transferred it to his mother knowing she was alive. Exact dollar amounts and dates, if possible. I nodded. From Catherine, confirmation that she faked her death. That she used a homeless woman's body. That she's been living as Patricia Coleman. That she took the money knowing it was fraud. And Richard, confirmation that he helped plan it. That he knew about the homeless woman. That he's been harboring Catherine for the past year. If you can get him to admit he paid Dr. Sullivan, even better. She slid the paper across to me. These are the key points. Get them to say these things on tape and the prosecutor will have an airtight case. How long would they go to prison? Catherine with insurance fraud over $1 million, identity theft and conspiracy, 30 years easily. She might get 25 with a plea deal, but she's looking at federal prison either way. Richard, conspiracy and aiding and abetting a felony, 10 to 15 years. Daniel, Victoria paused. Your son is in a complicated position. He received the fraudulent money and distributed it, which makes him guilty of insurance fraud and money laundering. He's looking at 20 to 30 years. 20 to 30 years. Daniel would be nearly 70 when he got out. Unless, Victoria continued, he cooperates fully. If he testifies against Catherine and Richard provides all the financial records, admits everything on the stand, the prosecutor might offer a deal. Maybe 7 to 10 years. Maybe less. He already confessed everything to me. Good. Then he'll confess it again. On tape. And that tape will be Exhibit A when this goes to trial. I left Victoria's office with a checklist of exactly what I needed. Dates, dollar amounts, explicit admissions of guilt. I sat in my truck in the parking garage and pulled out my phone. The recording app was already installed. I'd downloaded it 2 days ago. I tested it, played it back, crystal clear. Then I texted Daniel, "We need to talk. Just you and me, one last time." The reply came 30 seconds later. "Okay, Dad, when?" "Day after tomorrow, noon, Trattoria Giuseppe on Central. You know it." "Yeah, I'll be there." I stared at the screen. Day after tomorrow, I'd sit across from my son in a crowded Italian restaurant and ask him to confess again to destroying my life. And this time, every word would be evidence. I thought about calling it off, thought about just taking Frank's report to the police and letting them handle it. Daniel had already apologized. He'd already admitted everything. Did I really need to put him through this again? Then I thought about Catherine laughing in those surveillance photos. Thought about Richard's hand on my shoulder at the funeral. Thought about 11 months of visiting a stranger's grave while they lived their best lives 20 miles away. Yes, I needed to do this. Not just for the prosecutor's case. For me. I needed to look Daniel in the eye one more time and hear him admit what he'd done. I needed it on tape. Permanent. Undeniable. And then I needed him to know that I was the one who'd brought it all crashing down. I checked the recording app one more time. Charged. Working. Ready. In 2 days, I would sit across from my son and ask him to confess to destroying my life. And this time, every word would be evidence. Catherine thought she'd escaped. She was wrong. I was coming for all of them. The restaurant was quiet, almost empty for a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel sat across from me, fidgeting with his napkin. He looked thinner than I remembered, hollowed out like guilt had been eating him from the inside. Trattoria Giuseppe. 2 o'clock. I'd arrived early and started the recording app before Daniel walked in. The phone sat face down beside my bread plate microphone aimed at the table, recording everything. "Thanks for coming," I said. He looked relieved. Probably thought this was about reconciliation. He had no idea. "I've been thinking about what you told me," I said. "And I need to understand something." Daniel leaned forward, eager. "Anything, Dad. Did Mom ever talk about me after she died? When you'd call her? Did she ever ask how I was doing?" The question caught him off guard. Sometimes. Sometimes yes or sometimes no." He looked down. "No, she didn't want to know. She said it was easier that way." Easier. It was easier for Catherine to pretend I didn't exist. "When was the last time you saw her at Richard's house?" 3 weeks ago. She wanted to know if you were moving on." "And what did you tell her?" "I said you seemed better. That you'd started going back to work more." My son had reported back to my dead wife that I was recovering, like I was a patient getting over the flu. "Does Tyler know?" I asked. "Richard's son. Does he know who Patricia really is?" Daniel shook his head. "No. Nobody knows except me, Mom, and Richard. Tyler thinks Patricia is just Dad's new girlfriend, a widow from California." "What about Jennifer?" "She doesn't know either. Mom's been careful. She even changed her laugh, made it higher, lighter. Changed the way she walks. Tyler and Jennifer have no idea." The level of deception was staggering. Catherine hadn't just faked her death, she'd created an entirely new person. "Tell me about the money," I said. "Not the amounts. Tell me how it felt when you transferred that first 50,000. What were you thinking?" Daniel went pale. "I thought about you, about how you'd react if you found out. I almost didn't do it. I sat there with the transfer screen ready for 20 minutes. But you did it anyway. She called, said she needed cash. Reminded me about the $1 million she'd promised. Said this was just the first step. And the business. Do you walk into Mitchell Climate Control and feel anything, knowing you got it by faking your mother's death?" He couldn't look at me. "Every day, every single day, I see your name on everything. Mitchell Climate Control, family owned since 1989. It makes me sick. But not sick enough to confess. I wanted to. God, Dad, I wanted to. But I was scared. Scared of losing everything. Scared of prison. Scared of disappointing you." "You were scared of disappointing me," I repeated slowly. "So instead you let me grieve for a year. Let me visit a grave every Sunday. Let me cry holding your mother's sweater. I know how that sounds. Do you—" My voice was still calm but steel underneath. "Do you know what it's like to bury someone you loved for 35 years, to stand at a casket while your world falls apart, and then find out it was all a performance?" Daniel was crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tell me about the funeral. What were you thinking when you saw me break down? I wanted to die." His voice barely a whisper. "Watching you cry, knowing it was fake, I wanted to tell you right there. But Richard was watching. Mom made me promise I wouldn't say anything no matter what. So you chose prison for me instead. Emotional prison. For a year." He didn't answer. Just sat there shaking. I took a sip of water. Let the silence stretch. "The homeless woman. Did your mother ever tell you her name?" "No." "Anything about her?" "Mom said she used to be a teacher. Elementary school. New Mexico, I think. She moved to Phoenix for treatment, but the cancer was too far gone. Ended up on the streets when she couldn't afford rent. A teacher. The woman in Catherine's grave had spent decades helping children, and she'd died alone, been stuffed in a coffin under someone else's name, buried without anyone knowing who she really was." "Does that bother you?" I asked. "That a woman died and nobody knows where she's buried?" Daniel looked up. "Every night. It bothers me every single night." "Good. It should." The waiter came by. I ordered pasta I wouldn't eat. Daniel ordered nothing. When the waiter left, I leaned forward. "One more question. If I hadn't seen your mother at that bank, would you have ever told me?" Daniel stared at me for a long moment. "No. I don't think I would have." "Why not?" "Because I'm a coward, Dad. I'm weak. I wanted the money more than I wanted to do the right thing. And every day made it easier to keep lying. After a month, I thought you were healing. After 6 months, you seemed better. After a year, I thought maybe you'd move on. Start over. And I could keep the secret forever." "Keep the $4.5 million forever, you mean?" He flinched. "Yes." I looked at my son, This man I'd raised, taught to throw a baseball, brought into my business. This man who'd sold me out and convinced himself he was doing me a favor. How much did they pay you, Daniel? Daniel looked down. Mom promised me $1 million from the insurance and the business, all $3.5 million. I nodded slowly. So you sold your father for $4.5 million. That's good to know. Daniel's face crumpled, but I felt nothing. The recording was still running. How much did you actually receive from the insurance? I asked. I needed specifics. Dates. Numbers. Victoria had been clear, the more details, the stronger the case. Daniel wiped his eyes with his napkin. $1.45 million in June 2023, about 6 weeks after the funeral. And you transferred how much to your mother? $1.1 million, over 7 months, 6 different transfers. Walk me through them. Every single one. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, opened his banking app. July 18, 2023, $50,000 to Patricia Coleman's Wells Fargo account. I watched him scroll through the transactions, each one a knife in my back. September 12th, $200,000. October 8th, $150,000. November 15th, $300,000. December 4th, $200,000. January 9th this year, another $200,000. And you kept $350,000 for yourself. Yes. He couldn't look at me. How did you communicate with her? I asked. You couldn't call her old number. So how Maxim? Burner phone. Mom bought it in May right after she moved in with Richard. She'd text me from it. Nothing incriminating, just, hey honey, how are you stuff? Like a normal mom checking in. But it was code. If she said things are tight this month, that meant she needed money. And you'd just transfer it. Yeah. Where did you meet her when you saw her 3 weeks ago? Richard's house, 1523 West Saguaro Boulevard, Scottsdale. I'd text her first, make sure Richard and Tyler weren't home. Then I'd drive over. We'd sit in the backyard and talk. 1523 West Saguaro Boulevard. The address Frank had in his report. I made sure to say it out loud, clear for the recording. That's where she's living now with Richard. Yes, she has her own room, but... He trailed off. But what? But she sleeps in his room. They're together, like a real couple. Of course they were. 7 years of an affair doesn't just stop because you fake your death. Does Richard know you've been visiting? Yeah, he's always been part of it. Sometimes he'd be there too, asking how you were doing if you seemed suspicious about anything. My best friend, I said slowly, would sit there with my supposedly dead wife and ask my son if I suspected anything. And you'd tell them I didn't. I thought I was protecting everyone, Daniel said. I thought... You thought you were protecting your $4.5 million. He flinched, but didn't argue. Tell me about Richard, I said. How did he pay Dr. Sullivan cash check? Cash. $50,000 in hundreds. Richard drove to Dr. Sullivan's house one night in March, handed him a gym bag full of money. Dr. Sullivan counted it right there on his kitchen table. How do you know that? Richard told me. He thought it was funny. Said Dr. Sullivan's hands were shaking so bad he kept losing count. Gee, a doctor selling his medical license for $50,000, and Richard had thought it was funny. What about the funeral home? I asked. Messenger mortuary. Did they know? No. Richard just told them it was a closed casket funeral because of the accident. Paid extra for expedited service. They never questioned it. And the grave at Green Acres Memorial Park. You stood there and watched them lower a stranger into the ground. Yes. Did you feel anything? Daniel's voice broke. I felt like I was watching my own soul get buried. Good, I said. Because that's exactly what you did. Silence fell between us. The restaurant sounds seemed too loud, silverware clinking, the espresso machine hissing, someone laughing at another table. Normal sounds in a world that felt anything but normal. Does Richard know I found out? I asked. Daniel's head snapped up. What? No. How would he? I'm asking you. Have you told him I know Mom's alive? No, God, no. If Richard knew you knew, he'd make Mom disappear again. They'd run. I don't know where, but they'd leave Arizona and I'd never see her again. And that would bother you? Not seeing the woman who faked her death and destroyed your father? She's still my mother, Daniel whispered. No, I said. She was your mother. Now she's a criminal. And so are you. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. Dad, don't call me that. My voice was ice. You don't get to call me that anymore. Not after what you've done. Daniel's face went white. Please. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but you're right, you don't. I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and threw 2 20s on the table. That should cover my water? Wait. Daniel reached across the table, grabbed my arm. Where are you going? I looked down at his hand on my sleeve. Let go of me. Are you going to the police? What do you think? Panic flooded his face. Please don't. Please, Dad. If you go to the police, we'll all go to prison. Mom, Richard, me, we'll all. You should have thought of that before you helped your mother fake her death. I pulled my arm free. You made your choice, Daniel. Now you get to live with it. What about the business, Mitchell Climate Control? It's worth millions. If I go to prison, you'll lose everything. I already lost everything, I said. The day your mother climbed into a coffin and you helped her close the lid. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Daniel calling my name, his voice cracking. Other diners were staring. I didn't care. Outside, the Phoenix sun hit me like a wall. I walked to my truck, climbed in, and sat there for a moment, engine off, just breathing. Then I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. 42 minutes. Every word clear. Every date, every dollar amount, every name. The addresses, the confession. Daniel admitting he'd known for 3 years. Admitting he'd taken the money. Admitting he'd lied at the funeral. I texted Victoria, I have it. Call Phoenix PD. Her reply came 30 seconds later. On it. Don't do anything until you hear from me. But I was already starting the engine. Already pulling onto Central Avenue, heading north toward Scottsdale. It was time for Catherine and Richard to meet the man they thought they'd buried. Robert is pulling up to 1523 West Saguaro Boulevard right now. The recording is done. The evidence is gathered. If you're still here, drop a comment with your prediction. Will Catherine and Richard confess, or will they deny everything? Quick note. This story includes fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes. Feel free to exit if it's not your style. Let's continue. The call came at 7 a.m. the next morning. Mr. Mitchell, this is Detective Morris, Phoenix Police Department. Your son was taken into custody an hour ago. I was sitting at my kitchen table, coffee untouched, staring at nothing. I'd barely slept. I know, I said. I gave you the evidence. We're executing warrants for Catherine Mitchell and Richard Thompson this afternoon. 3 o'clock. Thought you should know. 3 o'clock. In 8 hours, it would all be over. At 2:30, I drove to Scottsdale, to 1523 West Saguaro Boulevard. Parked across the street, same spot as before. I needed to see this happen. At 2:55, 3 unmarked police cars pulled up. No sirens, no lights, Detective Morris, tall, black, late 40s, got out, saw my truck, walked over. "Mr. Mitchell, I thought you were coming to the station." "I needed to be here." He studied me, nodded. "Stay in the truck. Don't interfere." "I won't." But when Morris knocked and Catherine opened the door, I couldn't help myself. I got out, walked across the street. Morris saw me. His jaw tightened, but he didn't stop me. Catherine stood in the doorway, yoga pants and a sweater, hair in a ponytail, comfortable, at home, alive. Her eyes found mine. 35 years of marriage, 1 year of lies, all of it coming down to this moment. "Robert," her voice barely a whisper. "What are you—" "Hello, Patricia," I said. "Or should I say Catherine?" Her face crumpled. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You faked your death, stole $1.5 million. Let me bury a stranger while you built a new life with my best friend." Richard appeared behind her. "Robert, you need to leave." 35 years, Richard. I looked at him now. "I trusted you for 35 years, and you were sleeping with my wife. Planning this with her. Standing beside me at her funeral, crying fake tears while you already knew she was alive." Richard's face was stone. No denial. No apology. "I have a recording," I said. 42 minutes of Daniel confessing everything. The homeless woman, Dr. Sullivan, the $50,000 in cash, all of it. Detective Morris has it now." Catherine's knees buckled. Richard caught her. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "You faked your death." The words exploded out. "You used a dying woman's body as a prop. You let our son betray me for money. And you never meant to hurt me." "Mr. Mitchell." Detective Morris stepped between us. "Step back now." I did. Backed away, hands shaking. Morris turned to them. "Catherine Mitchell, Richard Thompson, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, identity theft, and filing false documents. You have the right to remain silent." That's when Tyler's SUV pulled into the driveway. Richard's son got out, saw the police cars, saw his father being handcuffed. "Dad, what's going on?" Then he saw me. "Mr. Mitchell." "Tyler, take the kids inside." Catherine started. "No." My voice cut through. "Tyler deserves the truth. Patricia Coleman isn't your father's girlfriend. She's my wife, Catherine. She faked her death a year ago. Your children have been calling my supposedly dead wife Grandma Patricia while I've been grieving." Tyler's face went white. "Dad." Richard couldn't meet his eyes. "Is it true?" Tyler's voice shaking. "Yes," Catherine said quietly. "I'm sorry, Tyler." Tyler staggered back. Jennifer, his wife, grabbed his arm. In the back seat, Sarah and Ryan pressed against the windows, eyes wide. "You let my kids—" Tyler couldn't finish. He turned to Jennifer. "Get them out of here, now!" Jennifer ran to the SUV, started backing out. Through the window, I saw Sarah's face, confused, scared, calling for Grandma Patricia. Tyler stood there watching them go, then turned to his father. "I'll never forgive you for this. Never." He walked to his car and drove away without looking back. Morris finished reading rights. 2 officers led Catherine and Richard to separate cars. As they passed me, Catherine looked up. "I loved you once, before everything went wrong." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. Richard didn't say anything, didn't even look at me, just let the officers guide him into the car, head down. I noticed then how Catherine looked, pale, thin, older than weeks ago at the bank. Something was wrong. "Is she sick?" I asked Morris. He glanced at the car where Catherine sat, head against the window. "She's been refusing medical treatment. We'll get her checked out at the station." Refusing medical treatment. just like the homeless woman had. The police cars pulled away. Morris stayed behind, taking notes. "Are you going to be okay, Mr. Mitchell? Was I my wife of 35 years just got arrested? My best friend in handcuffs. My son already in custody. My business would be seized. Everything I'd built was gone." "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." Morris nodded, handed me a card. "The DA will need you to testify in a few months. Call if you have questions." I took it, watched him drive away. The street was quiet now, just me standing in the driveway where my dead wife had built her second life. The copper wind chimes swayed in the breeze. I thought about Sarah and Ryan crying in that SUV, confused why they couldn't see Grandma Patricia anymore. Thought about Tyler's face when he realized his father had lied to him. Thought about Daniel in a jail cell downtown. 3 people I'd trusted. 3 people who'd betrayed me. And now 3 people who'd face the consequences. Justice was coming. But it wouldn't bring back the year I'd lost or the family I thought I had. 3 weeks after the arrests, Detective Morris called. "Mr. Mitchell," he said quietly, "I need to inform you that Catherine Mitchell, passed away in custody last night. I was in my truck parked outside Mitchell Climate Control. I'd been sitting there for 20 minutes trying to convince myself to go inside." "How?" My voice was flat. "Heart failure. She'd been refusing food and medication since she was arrested. Her body just gave up. 3 weeks. She'd lasted 3 weeks." "I'm sorry for your loss," Morris said. Loss. Like Catherine had been taken from me instead of having chosen to leave. "She was already dead to me," I said. "A year ago. This just makes it official." Morris didn't respond. What could he say? "What happens now?" "There'll be an autopsy. Standard procedure. After that, the body will be released. You're still next of kin, so you'll need to make arrangements." Arrangements. A funeral. Just like last year, except this time, it would be real. "I'm not doing that," I said. "Sir, I'm not planning a funeral. Let the county handle it." Silence. Then, "Are you sure?" I'm sure." "All right. I'll note that." He paused. "One more thing. The sentencing hearings are scheduled. Richard Thompson's is next week. Daniel's the week after. Dr. Sullivan already took a plea deal, 5 years loss of medical license." "What about Richard and Daniel?" "Richard's looking at 12 years minimum, no parole. Daniel cooperated, gave us everything. The prosecutor's recommending 7 years, possibly reduced to 5 with good behavior." 7 years. Daniel would be 45 when he got out. "And the money. The $1.1 million is being returned to you, seized from her Wells Fargo account. The business will be released once proceedings finish, probably another month." I'd gotten it all back, except everything that mattered. Catherine was buried 3 days later at Green Acres Memorial Park, the same cemetery where we'd buried the homeless woman. The county handled everything. No service, no flowers, just a plain coffin and a plot with a temporary marker. I didn't go, but I did go to the other grave. The one that read Catherine Brooks Mitchell, 1966 to 2023, beloved wife and mother. I'd hired a company to exhume the body. It took 6 hours. I stood there the whole time watching them dig, watching them lift the coffin out. The homeless woman who'd been a teacher, who died of cancer, who'd been buried under someone else's name. The county cremated her remains and buried them in a section for unclaimed bodies. No name, no marker, just another Jane Doe. I thought about putting up a marker, thought about trying to find her real name, but I had nothing. Daniel didn't know. Catherine never told anyone. "I'm sorry," I said to the empty plot. "You deserved better than this." There was never a Catherine Mitchell buried there. Only a lie. The sentencing hearings were quick, clinical. I sat in the back and watched justice get served in 15-minute increments. Richard Thompson, 12 years federal prison for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. No parole. He'd be 69 when he got out. He didn't look at me when they led him away. Dr. James Sullivan, 5 years for medical fraud. Loss of medical license. Mandatory restitution of $50,000. He cried when the judge read the sentence. Said he was sorry. The judge didn't care. Daniel Mitchell, 7 years, federal prison for insurance fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Eligible for early release in 5 years. Mandatory restitution of $1.1 million. When they read Daniel's sentence, he turned and looked at me. Mouthed, "I'm sorry." I looked away. The house at 2847 East Camelback Road felt like a tomb. I walked through it that night, turning on lights, the living room where the shattered wedding photo still lay, the kitchen where Catherine made coffee every morning, the bedroom where we'd slept for 35 years. Every room held a memory I wasn't sure I could trust. Catherine laughing in the kitchen, was that real, or was she already planning her escape? Daniel's first steps in the hallway, had she seen a future accomplice? Our 30th anniversary, had she already been with Richard? 35 years, that turned out to be half truth, half lie. I stood in the bedroom doorway and looked at the nightstand where I'd left my wedding ring 3 weeks ago. Still there, gleaming in the lamplight. C+R forever. 6.17.89. Forever had ended. Not when Catherine died. Not when I saw her at the bank. But 7 years ago when she first looked at Richard and thought, what if I'd been living in a marriage that ended before I knew it was dying? I picked up the ring, held it for a moment, dropped it in the trash. I thought about the year I'd spent visiting that grave, the flowers I'd brought, the conversations I'd had with a headstone, standing there in the sun talking to a woman who was 20 miles away, building a new life. Catherine had made me a fool, but I'd let her. I'd trusted blindly, loved without question, believed what I wanted to believe. And now I was standing in an empty house surrounded by memories I couldn't trust, holding a wedding ring that meant nothing. The business would come back to me. $3.5 million in assets. The money would be returned. $1.1 million. I'd have everything back, except I wouldn't. Because what I'd lost wasn't money or property. It was trust, faith, the ability to look at someone I loved and believe they were telling me the truth. Catherine hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen my ability to love without fear. I walked to the living room window, looked out at the street. Normal houses, normal families, people who probably weren't living elaborate lies. Or maybe they were. How would I know? How would anyone know? That was the thing about betrayal this deep. It didn't just destroy what you had. It destroyed what you'd ever have again. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Every room held a memory I couldn't trust anymore. Catherine laughing in the kitchen. Daniel's first steps in the hallway. 35 years of a life that turned out to be half truth, half lie. I couldn't stay here. Not anymore. It was time to let go. The Arizona State Prison Complex sat at the edge of the desert, surrounded by barbed wire and silence. I'd made this drive twice in the past 6 months. Today would be the last time for both of them. The first visit was 3 months after the arrests. Richard Thompson sat across from me in the visiting room, his hands folded on the metal table between us. He'd lost weight. His hair had gone completely white. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. I know that doesn't mean anything now, he continued, but I need you to hear it. Catherine, she loved you once, before everything went wrong, before he stopped shaking his head, before I convinced her there was another way. Another way to what? I asked. To steal from me, to fake her death and let me grieve for a year. To be happy, Richard said. That's what I told her. That she deserved to be happy. That we both did. I leaned back in my chair. You weren't sorry for what you did, Richard. You were sorry you got caught. He looked down at his hands. Maybe that's true. There's no maybe about it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I stood up. Goodbye, Richard. He looked up surprised. That's it, I said. I'm not coming back. I didn't wait for his response. I just walked out. The second visit was 6 months later. Daniel looked thinner than I'd ever seen him. His prison uniform hung loose on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Dad, he said when he saw me. His voice cracked on the word. I sat down across from him. I didn't say anything. I know you hate me, Daniel said. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know I never wanted to hurt you. I got in too deep, and by the time I realized how wrong it was, I couldn't get out. You had a year to tell me the truth, I said. A whole year while I mourned your mother, while I stood at her grave every Sunday. You could have told me then. I know. But you didn't. You let me suffer. You let me believe she was dead. You cashed the insurance check and transferred the money and ran the business I built. And you looked me in the eye every time and said nothing. Daniel's face crumpled. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. Please, I need you to forgive me. I looked at him for a long moment. This was my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the kid who'd helped me in the shop on weekends, the young man I'd trusted with my life's work. I don't know if I can, I said quietly. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. What does that mean? It means I don't know, I said. Maybe someday. Maybe in 5 years when you get out. Maybe in 10. Or maybe never. I don't know yet. Please. But I know this, I interrupted. I can't stay in Phoenix. I can't run the business anymore. I can't live in that house. I can't walk past the grave where I thought your mother was buried. I can't do any of it. So, what are you going to do? I'm going to sell everything, I said. The house, the business, all of it. And I'm going to leave. Where will you go? I don't know yet, I said. Somewhere that doesn't remind me of the life I thought I had. Somewhere I can figure out who I am now. Daniel wiped his eyes. I understand. Do you? No, he admitted. But I want to. I stood up. Take care of yourself, Daniel. Dad, wait. I turned back. Do you think? He hesitated. Do you think Mom ever really loved you before everything went wrong? I thought about that for a moment, about the early years, about the laughter in the kitchen, about building the business together, about Daniel's first steps in the hallway. I used to think so, I said. But now I don't know what was real and what was a lie, and I'm not sure it matters anymore. It matters to me, Daniel said. Then you'll have to figure that out on your own, I said. Because I can't help you with that. I can't even figure it out for myself. I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Daniel call out one more time. I love you, Dad. I stopped. I didn't turn around. Maybe that's true, I said. Or maybe you just love the idea of having a father who forgives you. I don't know which one it is, and right now I don't have the energy to find out. Then I walked through the door and into the sunlight. As I drove away from the prison, I didn't look back. Forgiveness might come someday, maybe in 5 years, 10 years, or maybe never. But right now, I had something more important to do. I needed to find out who Robert Mitchell was when he wasn't someone's husband, someone's father, or someone's fool. It was time to discover the truth. The house sold in 3 weeks. $650,000. Less than I'd hoped for, but enough. The new owners walked through the rooms, pointing at walls they'd repaint and corners they'd turn into play spaces. They saw a future. I saw a past I needed to leave behind. The real estate agent handed me the paperwork. "Congratulations, Mr. Mitchell. This is a fresh start." I signed my name without looking up. Fresh start. As if selling a house could erase 35 years of lies. The packing took 2 days. I hired a company to handle the furniture. Most of it went to charity. The couch where Catherine used to read. The dining table where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners. The bed we'd shared for decades. All of it had to go. I kept almost nothing. A box of photos from when Daniel was young, before he learned to lie, before he became someone I didn't recognize. My father's watch, the one he'd given me when I turned 18. A few tools from the garage, the ones I'd used to build the business from scratch. Everything else felt tainted. Every picture frame held a memory I couldn't trust. Every piece of furniture carried the weight of a marriage that had been half real, half performance. The hardest part was the kitchen. I stood there on the last morning looking at the spot where Catherine used to make coffee, where she'd laughed, where she'd kissed me goodbye before leaving for errands, or so I'd thought. How many of those errands had been meetings with Richard? How many of those smiles had been rehearsed? I picked up the coffee mug she'd always used, the blue one with the chipped handle. She'd refused to replace it for years, saying it was her favorite. I almost packed it. Then I set it back down on the counter and walked away. The new owners could throw it out or keep it. Either way, it wasn't mine anymore. I didn't know. And I was tired of trying to figure it out. The neighbors came by to say goodbye. Carol from next door brought cookies, her face full of concern. "We heard about the divorce," she said carefully. "I'm so sorry, Robert. After everything you've been through." I'd told them a simplified version. Catherine hadn't died. We'd separated, and now we were getting divorced. It was easier than explaining the truth. Easier than watching their faces twist with pity or disgust. "Thank you, Carol," I said. "I appreciate it." "Where will you go?" "I'm not sure yet," I said. "Somewhere quieter. Somewhere I can think." She handed me the plate of cookies. "Well, wherever you end up, I hope you find some peace. You deserve it." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Peace. I wasn't sure what that looked like anymore. She hesitated at the door. "Robert, if you ever need anything, you have my number. Don't be a stranger." "I won't." I lied. After she left, I walked through the house one last time. The empty rooms echoed with my footsteps. No furniture, no pictures, no life. Just bare walls and hardwood floors, and the faint smell of cleaning solution. In Daniel's old bedroom, I stopped. This was where he'd grown up, where I'd read him bedtime stories, where we'd talked about his future, about taking over the business someday, about carrying on the Mitchell name. That future was gone now. Daniel was in prison. The business was being sold, and the Mitchell name felt like a curse instead of a legacy. I opened the closet door. Empty hangers swayed slightly. On the top shelf, someone had missed a baseball. I reached up and pulled it down. Daniel's Little League Championship game, 1998. He'd been 12 years old, so proud of that win. I turned the ball over in my hands. His signature was still visible on one side, written in permanent marker the day after the game. I slipped it into my pocket. One more thing to keep. One more reminder of who he'd been before everything fell apart. I closed the door and walked away. The new owners arrived at noon. The young father carried their daughter on his shoulders while his wife held a box of their belongings. They were smiling, excited, full of hope. "Thank you again, Mr. Mitchell," the wife said. "We absolutely love this place. We're going to make so many memories here." I handed them the keys. "Take care of it. It was a good home once." "Once?" The husband looked confused. "It can be again," I said quickly. "For the right people." The little girl pointed at the backyard. "Daddy, can we get a swing set?" "Sure, sweetheart," he said. "Whatever you want." I watched them walk toward the house, their house now, and felt something loosen in my chest. They would fill these rooms with laughter, with birthday parties and Christmas mornings and ordinary honest love. They would build a life here that wasn't based on lies. And maybe that was enough. Maybe knowing that this house would become something real again was the only closure I needed. I got in my car and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house grew smaller, the new family already disappearing through the front door. Somewhere inside those walls were 35 years of my life. The good, the bad, and the lies I'd believed were truth. The early mornings building the business. The late nights worrying about bills. The fights, the laughter, the quiet moments on the porch watching the sunset. But those years belonged to a different man. A man who'd believed his wife loved him. A man who'd trusted his son. A man who'd thought his best friend was loyal. That man was gone. I wasn't Catherine's husband anymore. I wasn't Daniel's father, not in any way that mattered. I wasn't Richard's friend. I wasn't even the owner of Mitchell Climate Control. I was just Robert Mitchell, 60 years old, $650,000 in the bank. No family, no business, no home. And somehow, for the first time in a year, that felt like freedom. The road stretched out ahead of me, empty and endless. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know who I'd become. But I knew one thing for certain: I was done mourning the past. It was time to build a future. Mitchell Climate Control Services had been my life's work. 35 years. From a garage with one truck to an industrial complex with 40 employees. Now it was time to let go of that too. The buyer was a regional HVAC chain looking to expand into Phoenix. They'd offered $3.2 million. It was a fair price, maybe even generous. I signed the papers without negotiating. My lawyer looked surprised. "You could probably get another $200,000 if you pushed back on some of these terms." "I don't want to push back," I said. "I just want it done." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll finalize everything by the end of the week." "How long until the money transfers?" 10 business days after closing, he said. "Standard procedure. But given the size of the transaction, we'll need to coordinate with your bank. Have you thought about what you're going to do with it?" I hadn't. Not really. The money felt abstract, like numbers on a screen that didn't quite belong to me. $3.2 million, plus the $650,000 from the house. Nearly $4 million total. It should have felt like winning. Instead, it felt like counting the cost of everything I'd lost. "I'll figure it out," I said. The hardest part was telling the employees. I called a meeting on a Thursday morning, gathering everyone in the warehouse. 40 faces looked back at me. Some had been with me for decades. Others were newer, hired in the last few years as the business grew. Mike Torres stood in the front row. He'd been my first hire back in 1992, fresh out of trade school. Now he was my operations manager, the guy who kept everything running when I wasn't around. I'm selling the company, I said. No preamble, no excuses, just the truth. The room went silent. The new owners are a solid outfit, I continued. They've promised to keep everyone on staff. Your jobs are safe. Your benefits will transfer. Nothing changes except the name on the checks. Why? Mike asked. Business is good. We just had our best quarter. I'd prepared for this question. I had my answer ready, the same simplified version I'd given the neighbors. Family emergency, I said. I need to step away for a while, take care of some personal things. It wasn't entirely a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. Mike didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Whatever you need, boss. We understand. A few others asked questions. About the timeline. About whether they'd get severance if the new owners changed their minds. About what would happen to their pensions. I answered everything as honestly as I could. But the whole time I felt like a fraud. These people had trusted me, had worked for me, had built their lives around the stability I'd promised them. And now I was walking away because I couldn't stand to be reminded of what my life had been. After the meeting, Mike pulled me aside. Robert, if you ever need anything, you call me. You hear, doesn't matter what it is or when. I shook his hand. I appreciate that, Mike, really. I mean it, he said. You gave me my first shot, taught me everything I know. If you need help, I'm there. I wanted to tell him the truth, about Catherine, about Daniel, about the year of lies and the fraud and the betrayal. But I couldn't. It was easier to let him think I was just a man dealing with family problems. Easier than watching his respect turn to pity. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. He hesitated, then added, We're going to miss you around here. It won't be the same without you. You'll be fine, I said. You've been running this place for years. The new owners are lucky to have you. He smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. Take care of yourself, boss. The final walkthrough happened on a Friday afternoon. The new owners wanted to see the facility one more time before the transfer became official. I walked them through the shop, the warehouse, the offices. They asked questions about equipment maintenance schedules and client retention rates and employee turnover. I answered everything mechanically, going through the motions. In my old office, there was a photograph on the wall, the grand opening in 1989. Catherine and I stood in front of the first service truck holding a pair of oversized scissors. We were both smiling, young and optimistic, ready to build something together. The new owner noticed me staring at it. You want to take that with you? I shook my head. No, leave it. It belongs here. You sure looks like a good memory. It was, I said. But memories aren't always what they seem. He didn't understand, but he didn't push. He just nodded and moved on to the next room. After they left, I stood alone in the warehouse. This was where it had all begun, where I'd worked 16-hour days to keep the business afloat, where Catherine had helped with the bookkeeping in the early years, sitting at a folding table in the corner, because we couldn't afford a real desk. Or had any of that been real? Or had she been planning her exit even then, waiting for the right moment to take what she wanted and disappear? I walked over to the spot where that folding table used to be. Now it was a storage area filled with replacement parts and equipment. Nothing remained of those early days, except the memory. And even that felt poisoned. I thought about all the nights I'd come home exhausted, proud of what we were building together. All the times I'd told Catherine about a new contract or a satisfied customer, and she'd smiled and said she was proud of me. Had any of that been real, or had I been performing for an audience that was already planning to leave? I didn't know, and I was tired of trying to figure it out. I locked the door for the last time and dropped the keys in the mailbox for the new owners to pick up. Then I got in my car and drove away. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The building grew smaller, the Mitchell climate control sign fading into the distance. 35 years. Gone in 10 business days. That business had been my identity for 35 years. People knew me as the guy who ran Mitchell Climate Control. The guy who built something from nothing. The guy who provided good jobs and reliable service and took care of his employees. But it had also been built on a lie. On a marriage that was half real, half performance. On a partnership with a wife who'd been planning to fake her death and steal everything we'd worked for. And I couldn't carry that anymore. As I merged onto the highway, I felt something unexpected relief. The business was gone. The house was gone. The family was gone. Everything I'd built for 35 years had turned to ash. But I was still here. 60 years old. $3.2 million in the bank from the sale plus the $650,000 from the house. No job. No responsibilities. No one depending on me. For the first time since I was 25 years old, I was completely free. The question was, what does a 60-year-old man do when everything he built turns to dust? I didn't have an answer yet. But I had time to figure it out. And maybe that was enough. The new apartment was small. 800 square feet in downtown Tempe, about 20 miles east of Phoenix. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a balcony overlooking the university campus. It looked nothing like the house I'd left behind. And that was exactly the point. I moved in with almost nothing. The box of photos from Daniel's childhood, my father's watch, the baseball from Daniel's Little League game, a few tools I couldn't bring myself to donate. Everything else was new. A bed, a couch, a kitchen table with 2 chairs, though I couldn't imagine who the second chair was for. The first week, I barely left the apartment. I ate takeout and stared at the walls and tried to figure out what a 60-year-old man with no family and no job was supposed to do with his life. The answer didn't come. So I just sat there waiting for something to change. The second week, I started running. Not because I enjoyed it, but because I needed something to fill the hours. I'd wake up at 6, put on the running shoes I'd bought at a sporting goods store, and jog along the paths near Tempe Town Lake. The first few days, I could barely make it a mile. My knees hurt. My lungs burned. I felt ridiculous, a 60-year-old man huffing along the trail while college students breezed past me. But I kept going. By the end of the month, I was running 3 miles every morning. It didn't fix anything, but it helped. The third week, I signed up for an online Spanish class. I'd always wanted to learn another language, but there had never been time. Between the business and the marriage and the responsibilities, there was always something more important. Now I had nothing but time. The instructor was a woman in her 40s from Mexico City. She smiled a lot and spoke slowly, teaching me basic phrases. Good morning. How are you? My name is Robert. Simple things. Baby steps toward becoming someone new. At first, I felt self-conscious repeating the words out loud in my empty apartment. But after a few lessons, it became easier. The language gave me something to focus on. Something that had nothing to do with Catherine or Daniel or the life I'd left behind. I also started cooking. I'd never been good at it. Catherine had always handled the meals, and after she died, I'd survived on frozen dinners and restaurant takeout. But now alone in my small kitchen, I watched YouTube videos and learned how to make pasta from scratch, how to roast vegetables, how to grill a steak without burning it. It felt ridiculous sometimes, standing in front of the stove with my phone propped up on the counter following instructions from a stranger on the internet. But it also felt like progress, like I was building something even if it was just the ability to feed myself. The first time I successfully made carbonara, I sat at my kitchen table and ate it alone. It wasn't perfect. The sauce was a little too thick, and I'd overcooked the bacon. But I'd made it myself. And that felt like something. A month after moving to Tempe, I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Amanda Russell, and her office was in a quiet building near the university. She specialized in trauma and betrayal. "Tell me why you're here," she said during our first session. I told her everything. About Catherine, about Richard, about Daniel, about the year of lies and the fake death and the confession and the arrests. About selling the house and the business and walking away from everything I'd built. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded. "You've been through something most people can't even imagine," she said. "And you're still standing. That takes strength." "I don't feel strong," I said. "I feel like I'm falling apart." "Falling apart and rebuilding are sometimes the same thing," she said. "You're not the man you were a year ago. And that's okay. The question is, who do you want to become?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. "That's okay too," Dr. Russell said. "We'll figure it out together." Over the next few weeks, we talked about everything. About the guilt I felt for not seeing the signs earlier. About the anger I still carried toward Catherine and Richard and Daniel. About the shame of being the guy who got fooled for an entire year. "You didn't get fooled," Dr. Russell said during one session. "You trusted the people you loved. That's not a weakness. That's what love is supposed to look like. But they used that trust against me." "They did," she agreed. "And that says everything about them and nothing about you." I wasn't sure I believed her, but I wanted to. Dr. Russell also recommended a support group for survivors of betrayal. We met every Tuesday night in a church basement in Tempe. The first time I went, I almost turned around and left, but I forced myself to walk through the door and sit in the circle of metal folding chairs. There were 8 of us that night. A woman whose husband had embezzled from their joint account and disappeared. A man whose wife had faked a terminal illness to cover an affair. A college student whose parents had stolen his identity to open credit cards in his name. Everyone had a story. Everyone had been betrayed. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it brief. My wife faked her death to steal from me. My son helped her. My best friend was in on it too. The room was silent for a moment. Then the woman next to me reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "That's awful." "Thank you," I said. It didn't fix anything, but it helped. Over the weeks that followed, I kept coming back. I listened to other people's stories. I shared pieces of my own. And slowly, I started to feel less alone. I also started volunteering. Once a week, I went to St. Vincent de Paul, the homeless shelter, where Catherine had found the woman who'd taken her place in the grave. I didn't tell anyone there about the connection. I just showed up, served meals, and listened to people's stories. There was something healing about being around people who had nothing, who'd lost everything through bad luck or addiction or illness. They didn't ask questions. They didn't judge. They just needed help, and I could give it. One evening, a man in his 50s sat across from me while I served him dinner. He looked tired, worn down by life. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're welcome," I said. "You do this every week." "I try to." He nodded. "That's good of you. Most people don't care about folks like us." "I care," I said. And I realized as I said it that it was true. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the running, the Spanish lessons, the cooking, the therapy, the support group, the volunteering, I started to feel like myself again. Not the self I'd been before. That man was gone. But a new self. Someone quieter. Someone more careful. Someone who didn't trust as easily, but who also didn't carry the weight of other people's lies. One evening I sat on my balcony and watched the sunset over the university campus. Students walked below, laughing and talking, carrying backpacks and coffee cups. They were so young, so full of hope and possibility. I'd been their age once, before Catherine, before the business, before the 35 years of building something that turned out to be half real and half illusion. And now at 60, I was starting over, learning Spanish, learning to cook, learning to be alone without feeling lonely. For the first time in a year, maybe for the first time in 35 years, I felt like I could breathe. The weight of the lies was gone. The weight of the betrayal was fading. I was 60 years old, starting from scratch and terrified. But I was also free, and freedom I was learning was worth more than any marriage, any business, or any lie I'd ever believed. This was my life now, and for the first time it was truly mine. I learned something over the past year. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the lies themselves. It's learning to trust yourself again. For months after everything fell apart, I questioned every decision I'd ever made. Every moment I'd believed Catherine loved me. Every time I'd trusted Daniel. Every conversation with Richard where I'd thought we were friends. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs Dr. Russell helped me understand that I hadn't missed anything? There were no signs to miss. Catherine had been planning this for years. She'd been careful, deliberate. She'd hidden everything perfectly because that's what con artists do. You weren't stupid, Dr. Russell said during one of our sessions. You were human. You loved someone and you trusted them. That's not a weakness. That's what we're supposed to do. But they used that against me. They did, she agreed. And that says everything about who they are, not who you are. It took me a long time to believe her, but eventually I did. A year after I saw Catherine at the bank, I stood on my balcony in Tempe and thought about where everyone had ended up. Catherine was dead. Really dead this time. She died alone in a prison cell, her body failing after months of refusing treatment. Part of me had expected to feel something when I heard the news. Satisfaction, maybe, or closure. But I felt nothing. She'd made her choices. She'd lived with the consequences. And now she was gone. Richard was serving his sentence. 12 years minimum? No parole. He'd be 74 when he got out, assuming he lived that long. Tyler had stopped visiting him after the first year. Jennifer had filed for divorce. His grandchildren would grow up barely remembering him. He'd traded everything for a few years with Catherine, and in the end, he'd lost it all. Daniel still had 5 to 7 years left on his sentence. We hadn't spoken since that last visit at the prison. He'd written me a few letters, but I hadn't opened them. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday I'd be ready to hear whatever he had to say. But not yet. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate takes energy, and I didn't want to waste any more energy on people who'd already taken so much from me. They'd made their choices. They'd live with the consequences. And I'd made mine. One Tuesday night at the support group, a new woman joined us. She was in her 30s, and her story was painfully familiar. Her husband had been cheating on her for 2 years. He'd hidden money, lied about where he was going, made her feel crazy for questioning him. I don't know how to trust anyone anymore, she said, her voice breaking. I don't even know how to trust myself. I recognized that feeling. I'd lived with it for months. After the meeting, I pulled her aside. It gets easier, I said. She looked at me skeptically. Does it? Not right away? I admitted. And not all at once, but yes, eventually it does. How long did it take you? About a year, I said. But everyone's different. The important thing is to keep moving forward, even when it feels impossible. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you. You're not alone, I said. And you're not stupid. You're human. And the truth is going to hurt for a while. But eventually it'll set you free. She smiled just a little. I hope you're right. I am, I said. And I realized as I said it that I believed it. Over the following months, I kept building my new life. I kept running, kept learning Spanish, kept cooking, kept going to therapy and the support group and volunteering at the shelter. I also started doing something new. I began writing. Nothing fancy, just my story. Everything that had happened. Everything I'd learned. At first it was just for me, a way to process everything, a way to make sense of the chaos. But eventually, I started thinking about other people who might be going through something similar. People who'd been betrayed. People who felt stupid and broken and alone. Maybe my story could help them. Maybe it could show them that survival was possible. That rebuilding was possible. That freedom was possible. One evening I sat on my balcony and read through everything I'd written. The discovery at the bank. The confrontation with Daniel. The arrests. The aftermath. The slow, painful process of starting over. It was all there. The good, the bad, and the ugly truth. And for the first time I felt proud of it. Not proud of what had happened to me, but proud of how I'd handled it. Proud of the fact that I'd survived, that I'd rebuilt, that I'd found a way to move forward. I thought about the man I'd been a year ago, standing in that bank watching my dead wife walk past me, frozen, terrified, shattered. That man was gone. I thought about the man I'd been for 35 years, the husband, the father, the business owner, the guy who thought he had everything figured out. That man was gone too, and in their place was someone new, someone quieter, someone more careful, someone who understood that trust was a gift, not a guarantee, someone who knew that the people you love can hurt you, but that doesn't mean you should stop loving. I was Robert Mitchell, 61 years old, living in an 800-square-foot apartment in Tempe, learning Spanish, learning to cook, learning to be alone without feeling lonely. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have a son, not in any way that mattered. I didn't have a business or a legacy or anything to pass on to the next generation. But I had myself, and that was enough. I stood on my balcony that night watching the sun set over the Arizona desert. Somewhere out there, Daniel was in prison. Somewhere out there, Richard was too. And somewhere beneath the desert sand, Catherine was buried. For real this time. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about tomorrow, about the man I was becoming, about the life I was finally living on my own terms. The truth had taken everything from me, my wife, my son, my best friend, my business, my home, 35 years of my life. But it had also given me something priceless myself, and that I realized was worth more than any lie I'd ever believed. Looking back at everything that happened, I realized something important: don't be like me. Don't wait a year to question what doesn't make sense. Don't ignore the signs because you're afraid of what you might find. Don't trust so completely that you forget to protect yourself. God gave us intuition for a reason. When something feels wrong, it usually is. I ignored that voice inside me, the one that whispered doubts when the casket stayed closed, when Richard was too available, when Daniel avoided my eyes. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was wrong. Here's what I've learned. Trust is a gift, not a guarantee. The people you love can hurt you. Your family can betray you. And sometimes the life you built is half real and half illusion. But here's the other lesson: God doesn't waste pain. Every betrayal taught me something. It taught me to value truth over comfort. It taught me that starting over at 60 isn't the end, it's a new beginning. It taught me that freedom is worth more than any lie, no matter how beautiful that lie once seemed. If you're going through something similar, if someone you trusted has betrayed, you know this, you're not stupid. You're human, and God sees your pain. He's walking with you through it, even when it feels like you're walking alone. My advice: don't ignore the red flags. Don't sacrifice your peace for someone else's comfort. And don't wait for permission to protect yourself. Trust God, trust yourself, and remember, the truth will hurt, but it will also set you free. Thank you for staying with me through the end of this journey. If this story touched your emotions or sparked new reflections, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. I'd really love to hear your perspective. And if you found value in Robert's story, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Quick note: this story contains fictionalized elements crafted for reflection and meaningful lessons. If this style isn't for you, that's completely fine. Find the content that truly connects with you.